I guess we do kind of live in an information bubble, and it's kind of weird to think that, but at the same time, I realize it completely because I've been, sort of screaming about these technologies and these other things, and I'm in this information bubble, and I'm not doing it with the right communication because I don't have like a whole network behind me to like do video editing and animations and stuff and make all this stuff super easy and accessible to people in like 5 minute chunk.
Right, let's go. So, welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today, I'm talking with Jeremy Riss, who is famous for appearing on Timcast IRL and is the Twitter handle Alien Scientist. He's a physics bachelor who's been working independently researching advanced technologies like metallic glass, anti-gravity warp drives, quasi-crystals, and all of which seemed crazy 15 years ago and have since been completely vindicated by some Freedom of Information Act declassified documents that have come out. And he's since started to work with APEC and bring together a whole bunch of scientists who worked with the government and with some huge military contractors on advanced technologies like hypersonic flight, anti-gravity stuff, warp drives, just a whole bunch of crazy sci-fi sounding technology. So Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Josh.
No problem. So before we start, I have to plug two things. First, my book, Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. It is out today as of recording day, so that's really exciting. It's in my mind the most important look at how social media affects politics and the real world. And also we have a sponsor, ExpressVPN. You can get 35% off with a 30-day money-back guarantee on 12 months of ExpressVPN. So, Jeremy, down to some questions. So, how did you first get involved, or how did you first get excited about science? Like, what's your earliest memory of being like fascinated by physics or like advanced alien technology or any of that?
Ooh, well, my dad was an engineer. He's a chemical engineer, did control systems engineering for, refineries and power plants and stuff like that. So he's always been like a technical influence on me. I'd say it probably came from my father. But I also did watch a lot of, television programs, back in the day, How It's Made, Discovery Channel, and also, like Unsolved Mysteries and a lot of that stuff, which got me into like, some exploring some of these mysteries too, and Area 51 and, aliens and that kind of business. So, but I think I really got into it strongly in my senior year of high school when I read not Behold a Pale Horse. I read a book called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, by Richard Feynman, who was recruited out of MIT at like age 18 to go work on the Manhattan Project and develop some of the most classified physics and one of the most classified programs in history. And just learning about his experience with the physicists that were involved, the science that they were doing, and how the secrets were, sort of kept within this, inner circle of people who, and no one really outside that circle really had any understanding about the scope of the project or what was really going on at the time. And we live in a completely different world today than that existed in the 1940s, with the internet and the ability to share information worldwide at the drop of a click of a button. Realistically, the ability to keep secrets has been greatly diminished by the internet, I feel, and it's just great that we're able to even do this and have these conversations and have these talks. Because if things had gone a little bit differently in the 1940s, we might be speaking German right now or not having this conversation at all, right?
Yeah. I mean, like most people don't know the Americans had it, or the Nazis had a program to invade America and bomb Manhattan and everything. That was all on paper. They were ready to go. If they hadn't,
They actually didn't they bomb a ship they bombed a ship at one of the ports in Manhattan, and I think it was either Manhattan or Roanoke, Virginia, or somewhere in Virginia, maybe. I don't know. I remember hearing something about they bombed actually one of our vessels, and that was I actually read that in Jim Mars's book Crossfire, and he was talking about the mafia and the mafia's involvement in intelligence, and that basically the mafia owned the docks and all the shipping ports, and that they had to use the mafia for intelligence collection because in order to solve this sort of bombing of this boat that had happened. And I thought that was super interesting as well. So there's this underworld element that exists that people aren't aware of, as in addition to the high level upper academia echelon of physics graduate schools, and these top level academic achievers like Wolfgang Pauli or Jean von Neumann or Oppenheimer or any number of physicists that worked on the Manhattan Project that were recruited out of our top universities, and they took the best of the best and set them on this project. And but they also use the worst of the worst to collect, because those guys run all these sort of things under the seams, and they do it more efficiently and effectively than the government does sometimes, even though they're inherently corrupt. But it's sort of interesting because there's this overlap in these worlds, and you sort of see things differently when you're able to understand that those worlds exist and sort of see them, because they might not be apparent to the normal person. But anyways, I got into it more in 2000, like after graduating, not after graduating high school. I was going to college for a number of years off and on, and then I wanted to do physics. I started trying to do physics. The math was a little bit overwhelming at at first and stuff. I actually didn't take calculus in high school, and I had to muscle my way through a lot of calculus and algebra to catch up to get to where I needed to be for my sophomore freshman year of college. And so I did a lot of independent research on my own, though. I started reading about all this stuff online and investigating a lot of these other I don't know, I call them rabbit holes. People call them conspiracy theories. Some people call them unsolved mysteries or critical thinking or alternative history. There's a number of different terms for it, but basically getting into all that Nazi Bell stuff that was coming out around that time, early 2000s, and a lot of the anti-gravity stuff that was online, what you could find back then. Anyway, it was
where were you looking? Like, you say you were finding this stuff online, like where were you finding it at that time?
I mean, you was just going to Google and typing in anti-gravity every day, or typing in gravity control or propulsion technology, or and then you get into you find Podkletnov, and you start doing NASA, and you start going through nasa.gov or NASA documents and stuff, and then I get hooked in with people who are doing the whole FOIA thing, which is called FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. And these are kind of like the upper echelon nerds of information. And basically you can write these requests to the government. And as long as you know what you're looking for, and you ask for it the right way, they have to give it to you. And so if you, especially and then people rewrite FOIAs because they do research on the documents, and they're able so they get a batch of documents released from the government through this FOIA process. And then they go through and they do all the research, and they say all this stuff's redacted. So the government releases them all, and they redact information. So that's where the lines are all blacked out on the paper. And so we as researchers have to go through and kind of fill in the holes, you know what I mean? And figure out what's in there and the missing bits. And the way that we do that is we sometimes take guesses. And then you write in a specific request to the government for the same Freedom of Information Act, for that same exact document, but for the missing parts that contain this. And as long as you nail it, they have to give it to you. So
Really, like they're like obliged to give you that information, even though they've redacted it for whatever purpose.
sometimes they'll fight, like they'll fight to the tooth and nail, to not to give it to you and stuff, for certain things, because some of it's a lot of that stuff that's in the redacted information is what's I call personal or human intelligence, which is really key. If you were to unravel the Manhattan Project, all you'd have to do is have the list of all the physicists who were involved. Really, like those were the guys who were at the top echelon of, that project. And if you knew all those humans, and you could had some kind of sort of open communication or line of contact with them, then you could essentially know like all the deepest, parts of it. Like the thyristors and that von Neumann, and the timing sequences that he had developed for how to like do the bomb, and the how specific these timings had to be for like where all the parts of the bomb detonated in the right order and the right sequence and the right timing. And that was all crucial to getting this getting the physics right. And he did all the calculations for that and stuff. So that kind of stuff would the real intelligence, as I saw it, it exists within these human resources, so it's like you really have to find the humans that are working on this stuff. And it's hard as heck now to hide stuff, because everything's published. You can search for different things, and the only way that they hide stuff is by putting lots of disinformation out front and center, and hyping it up with massive they have a massive ability to just reach humongous audiences. And then they tap into people who have that ability, like people like Joe Rogan, sadly, I believe. I don't know. I'd love to go on his show and ask him why he still believes Bob Lazar almost a year later, and has done like literally no research into the case. He's like, every time he's like asking questions about it, he's still learning about it. I know. I'm sorry. I can't. I shouldn't even go on the Bob Lazar thing. My friend's so upset about it though, and he's the guy that I built boblazardebunk.com with. One of these guys that I met, a researcher, probably about 12 years ago. Let me get back to how I met Dan first off, and why we got involved in doing such extensive research into Bob Lazar and some of these other physics characters, because that's what I deal with, is the human resources and evaluation of like who these people are. And then
why don't we say, just before you start this, like who Bob Lazar actually is, for anyone listening who doesn't know. So Bob Lazar is a scientist who claimed to have worked at Area 51 and S4, and claimed to have maybe seen like some worked on like UFO craft, and potentially maybe seen like an alien. But yeah, there's a few holes in this.
Well, he thought it was an alien, and then later on he changed the story and said he thought it was a doll. You said he's a scientist, but that's not really confirmed. He owns a scientific supply company called United Nuclear, which he started in the late 80s, early 90s, I think, around the time that he was running a explosives expose called Desert Blast. Okay. And George Knapp, when he first interviewed Bob Lazar, he claims that he had never known Bob Lazar prior to this, and that he had just met him. But it's untrue, because he had covered Desert Blast in 86 and 87. And the Desert Blast Festival, which was covered by KLS, and George Knapp was the reporter on that. And the Desert Blast Festival was run by Gene Huff and Bob Lazar, the two guys who directed the Lazar tapes, which was the first commercially successful enterprise that came from that Lazar story. They sold a DVD and these things, the Lazar tapes. It wasn't a DVD. It was actually, this was back in the days of VHS.
Yeah, video
VHS tapes of this thing, and they for $30 a piece, and they made like $500,000. and they tried to get, and we have documents now that shows that they tried to get funding from John Testers of Testers Corporation to fund this, and they basically they asked him for $50,000 to make the documentary, and that he was going to get paid $500,000 or up to, they'd make millions in return, for what the film would be worth and what they could sell it for. So I don't know. I look into Bob Lazar's history. He did have some. He did work at the Meson Physics Facility, which is interesting, back in 1981. So like 8 years prior to when he claims that he was hired for this top secret program, where he was brought out to Area 51, and then they brought him to the secret subsection of Area 51, which he claims was at Papoose Lake. We've got all the satellite photos going back. He claims that there was a guard shack there, all this stuff. We've gone through and like every piece of that story in like with a fine-tooth comb, and it's none of it holds up. There's nothing there at that base. The real S4 is at Tonopah test site. He got that information from his friend Jim Tagliani, who was one of the guys that went up on the hill to go and film the UFOs with him. It was a whole group of UFO like buff people that were like doing this, and they like all these people like have something to gain by selling this story or pushing this story, and as it shows, like John Lear, who was the guy that basically have the whole testimony from John Lear of how he met Bob Lazar. You go back, and it's just crazy going into that whole case. I didn't mean to take a detour on Bob Lazar, but it just is one example.
That's all right. No, so but like
I think it actually is a good example because it shows people, because everyone thinks that this guy's a physicist. He portrays himself as a physicist. And I think it's funny because when you dig into it, you find that he has no curriculum vitae, which is your CV. That's like what papers you've published or what kind of work you've done. All right. And I'm not a physicist either in that regard. Okay. I have a bachelor's degree in physics from Bridgewater State University. I went to a state college and I got a physics degree. I had to learn math. I had to do math, and I know how to do a lot of math, and I know how to read papers and stuff. And that's pretty much what I do with my time, is reading papers and finding stuff like, all the stuff that's in this, that DIA report that I sent you earlier, that I said, this is stuff that I've been talking about for 10, 15 years now. Some of it just came out in the last 4 or 5 years, and to my knowledge anyway, even though this shows that they've been working on it for about the same amount of time, 10, 15 years. Some of this goes back 20 years. So this is interesting stuff. It's like confirmation of a lot of the research that I did. And, of course, there's nothing about element 115 in there, which was Bob Lazar's famous, claim to fame disclosure. We actually traced back everything that we could find on element 115 through the literature. And we actually traced it back to a May 1989 issue of Scientific American magazine, which had all the element 115 stuff, the island of stability, all that stuff on isomers and isotopes. And it was kind of an interesting to find that was the same exact month and year that Bob Lazar came out with his story. And
yeah, that seems like a touch convenient.
And it's funny. It's everyone trusts George Knapp, and they think that he's like the greatest thing in ufology and like this beacon of truth. And the guy made his career off selling Bob Lazar for 30 years. And I know for a fact that case is a lie. I know every single bit of it. I would be able to, if I got on Joe Rogan and he got me on with Bob Lazar for a debate, I would end him in like 5 questions. I mean, it would be over. And I know other people that have asked him similar questions. So maybe he's, he might try to get, some coaching and stuff. He'd have to go on with Jeremy Corbell, his bulldog. And then Jeremy Corbell would try to, I don't know. He's always got to have a handler with him beside him whenever he talks. And that's just nonsense. There's other physicists out there. I've been trying to get people to pay attention to this stuff. And then we have Joe Rogan, this massive platform, just, hammering away at this 30-year-old case that there's nothing there, bro. Bigelow is keeping his cards tight to his chest. This FOIA that was released shows that Bigelow Aerospace had contracts to do a lot of this research into metallic glass and these other technologies, which they're not talking about. Hint, hint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It couldn't be more obvious to me what's going on, having been, researching this as long as I have, and being involved with this. It's like I couldn't be more obvious what they're doing with the public's attention. You know
Well,
what I mean?
what I'm gonna do is when I put this podcast out, I chop it up into clips, and we'll make this Bob Lazar section a thing, and I'm gonna tweet it endlessly at Joe Rogan until he hears it, and challenge him. I don't know if he'll I don't know if he'll respond, but you never know.
I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I
Honestly,
know it's
I'm doing
worth
my
a
own
go.
thing. I have enough audience, and it's the audience that's interested in this
Mm,
already. You know what I mean?
mm,
It's the people. I don't need the people that are just looking for the next. Oh, let me just look on what's entertaining for tonight. I'm into the
mm,
people that are die hard and I've got everyone. I've got everyone who's anything right now, and anyone knows about me at least. Even if they don't know, even if they don't have full confidence in me yet.
mm.
Like Jack Sarfati was an example. He didn't want to speak at the conference at first. He's like, and there's a couple other people like that still feel like they don't want to, they have no interest in speaking at, Tim Ventura's conference. And I respect and I understand that, because Tim has let some people in before. No offense to Tim, he does a great job at moderating and stuff, but it's some of the people that get into these conferences. So but that's just I feel like we have to be open, to like letting anyone in, so like anyone can come and present. We have to like keep it open, but we have to like, so we started a policy now. We were screening their PDF beforehand, where he sends it to like everyone, and we make sure that this guy's like not, because we had a couple people where it's like, is this guy serious? Is he sabotaging the group? Like we built this whole conference, like I built this like the episode up, and then we have a guy coming on and it's talking nothing about science or engineering, and he's just talking about UFOs and aliens and stuff, and like who let this guy on, and like and we're all sitting there like, oh geez. Is this helping us or hurting us? And it's obvious that, I don't know, it comes obvious that like that there are, and you have to expect that there are those attacks, and then there's people in the audience saying, oh, this doesn't ever happens at scientific conferences. And it's like, dude, how many scientific conferences have you been into? I've always seen a couple people at the end sneak in. There's always the one guy at the conference that presents where like half the people walk out of the room, or they sit there like this the whole time. You know what I mean? There's always that guy. So
So why don't we back up a little, just for people who don't get like what we're talking about with the conference. So to like contextualize everything, like the reason that you're mad about Bob Lazar is because you have set up APEC, or you're were you the founder, or anyway, you've been a part of APEC, who are bringing together a whole bunch of scientists who have done like legit work on advanced technology with the US government or with private contractors or both. And you're trying to bring them all together and get them to explore and discuss a lot of this technology. Right. And you're frustrated because
let's back up a little bit. One second. So APEC started because there was these two other conferences that existed. They're the only big conferences for space propulsion and alternative energies, and it's the STAIF conference, which turned into the STAIF 2 conference, which is STAIFF, right? DARPA did a lot of recruiting for work out of the STAIF conference. It was basically like a conference where people could come and present papers and ideas on, and there was a section F of that conference, which was specifically on propulsion and propulsion technologies, and that was one of the more interesting ones. There's also another conference called the Estes Park Conference, which is run by Jim Woodward, of the Woodward effect and the Mach effect. He's basically the guy that's been running the Estes Park Conference, and it's another kind of separate propulsion conference. So I knew about these conferences. I followed them for years because they're a great source of information. You look at, what projects were presented there, and you can find a lot of the stuff before it went black, and it's a great way to find, because all these black projects have to go somewhere before they're given, before they're inducted into the government and given a contract. They go to these conferences, and that's where you're going to find the papers. That's where you're going to find the scientists. So that's where I did a lot of my human resources work early on. Then we took all those people from those conferences. We started attending those conferences and meeting more people from those conferences, right, over the years. And then just last year, when with COVID-19 and Zoom call and all these, the conferences went on to Zoom calls, right? And when they went to Zoom calls, we just got the email list and we said, we're going to start our own conference and we're going to make it every week instead of once a year, because once a year is not enough time. We're going to do it. We need to do something once a year. So it was kind of like, it wasn't just my idea. It was at like the whole group of us were getting together on WhatsApp and we were discussing this. And I brought Tim Ventura into the group because he's one of the guys that ran American Anti-Gravity early on that got me into this. You know what I mean? So when, I was researching American Anti-Gravity back in like early 2000. He was, had articles on Ning Li and NASA anti-gravity experiments, Podkletnov, the replications that were done in the US of that Podkletnov experiment, and stuff on Gravity Probe B, all kinds of interesting stuff that got me involved in doing the research into gravitation and just theory and the physics of gravity way back in the day. It's of course taken me in all crazier directions since then. But again, this is where the roots of that conference started, because we were attending these other conferences, meeting a lot of these scientists, and then we were having our own group chats to the point where we took some of the better people out of these conferences that would talk to us. At least some of them won't even talk to you, and that's how you know they're probably the people you really want to talk to, because they can't talk to you. But again, we've gotten enough of people that can talk to us, and enough people that say like, listen, I can't say anything, I can't tell you anything, but I can sit in the background and say hot or cold, right? I can lead you on a little bit. So we've got some good, some good guidance now, and I know that there's some disinformation in the group too, because when they see a group like us getting as far as we've come, they're going to try to send people after us, and they're going to send, people in the mix to kind of disrupt things or distract people and mix things up a bit. So we're on our toes about that. But again, it's a great idea of these conferences, of what we can do with the technology now. And COVID kind of actually, I don't know, it kind of changed all that, and it opened this up. And it also made a lot of these older guys that have been working on this for years, they're all, in their 70s, 80s, they're high risk now. And it's gotten a lot of them to talk more, to be more open about this, because our future is uncertain. We don't know. We need this technology to save humanity. And I think that more people, as they're understanding that message and understanding what this technology can do and what it means, they're engaging in like a public effort to, unify and rally the troops, so to speak, that maybe it doesn't have to come from the government, because it should come from a grassroots sort of organic kind of start. And that's where I'm coming from with it. I've never worked I've worked in construction for the past 15 years. I've worked in construction to put myself through college, and that's kind of what I do now. That's what I enjoy doing it. I like building stuff. I like working with my hands, and I like building stuff. I want to be building a craft in a lab somewhere and doing lab experiments and stuff. I'm not quite there yet. I've been going down to New Jersey and doing some experiments with Mark at his lab. But I'm meeting more people with more laboratories and more building experience and more capabilities now. And we're starting to network with those groups. After being on Tim Pool, it's opened me up to a lot more. I have a lot more, serious people contacting me, like people that are really, really solid engineers with really solid resumes and stuff. And, we're starting to discuss some ideas. I think there's technologies out there that really could go a long way. The 3D metal printing and 3D printing, although I don't know if 3D printing techniques always is the perfect way. There's some newer ones with the powder coating and the way they lay a laser they use powder layers of metal powders, and then they use lasers to melt the powders to create 3D print with metal.
Okay.
That way is pretty sick. There's some pretty amazing technologies out there, but we want to like get a facility together to start just experimenting with them. And I also I'm trying to get Elon's attention too with that, like, again, I don't know about the it does seem like we're in a bubble with the information, because I did that grandmother challenge recently. You saw the video I did with Elon, and I basically was like, how does Elon never heard of the Tic Tac? Because he told Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asked him about the Tic Tac.
Yeah.
And apparently, like, I guess we do kind of live in an information bubble, and it's kind of weird to think that, but at the same time, I realize it completely, because I've been, sort of screaming about these technologies and these other things, and I'm in this information bubble. And I'm not doing it with the right communication, because I don't have like a whole network behind me to like do video editing and animations and stuff, and make all this stuff super easy and accessible to people in like 5-minute digestible chunks of information. Oh, metallic glass, and now you're an expert.
Yeah.
5 minutes, here you go. Now, some of this stuff's real complicated, and the information bubble's real, because you realize, oh, I'm trying to get this information out to people, but some of them, my problem is getting people's attention long enough for them to understand it. And then you realize that some of the other stuff that you've been involved in is probably, they look at that first, because it's easier to digest and understand, because it's nonsense, because that's the nonsense stuff that you had to dig through for 15 years
Yeah.
to get to where you are. And they're just coming into this now, so they're like, well, let me go back to this stuff, because I'm not even they need like 15 years to catch up to my level now, like, and they have to, so they're at Bob Lazar right now, which is where I was like 15 years ago. And and I'm trying to bring them up to speed, but meanwhile they're like, oh, this guy's way too smart, and he got to work for the CIA, because how could he dare say that Bob Lazar is not telling the truth?
uh,
uh,
I mean, like, so there's two things I want to sort of ask you about there. That first of all, the Tic Tac, and just all of those videos that have come out in the last couple years, and that New York Times story that said that they've got like a crashed UFO, and just anything in that kind of like sphere. I find that, like, even when you show people like that, this is like, they're like, look, the US government is saying they don't know what this is. They're saying that
mhm.
there's quite like a fair chance that it's not of this world. The New York Times is saying that maybe the Pentagon has some sort of crashed vehicle that they think is not from this world. And you show people it, and then they go, yeah, but aliens aren't real. And there's almost like a wall between people's like acceptance. Like, you can see the news story, you can watch the video, but it doesn't like sink in that this is essentially like as close to like disclosure of that you're gonna get, because it's, and okay, it's not 100%, and we can't say for sure that we know that there's aliens, but like
No.
there's like quite a lot of compelling evidence, and I like to believe that they're real, because that's way more fun. But like,
Yeah.
there's like a wall, I feel, where people kind of hear it, and then they just go, no, and it like goes in one ear and straight out the other. But you said
Well,
that,
that's
like,
why I say that, especially the scientists, that they just see my name, alien scientist, and they just see the alien part, and they run the other way. And, so
but then you
it's the
get the
same
really
thing, because
passionate ones.
I'm not married to any idea, and I don't have evidence for aliens, and that's not necessarily what I'm, after here. More after just the scientific methods of looking for them. I talk about, like, new ways that SETI should be looking for aliens,
Hmm.
right? One of the things I mentioned, right, is we have new technologies out, and we have new understandings of physics and science that are going to help us to crack this puzzle, right? So as Elon Musk said, if they're here and they're visiting us, then they're very discreet. They're you know they're very good at like not being detected and seen. If this is the only interaction that we've had with them, if it's supposing that these are aliens, right? So they're very discreet. Um, could they be using technologies like stealth technologies to help with that discretion? And that's that stuff was thought up in the 60s and years ago in Star Trek. We were observing primitive alien civilizations from a invisible outpost that was, equipped with cloaking, to blend into the rocks and stuff like that. That was in the start. This was from the 90s, actually. Star Trek, Who Watches the Watchers episode. You can go watch that. And Picard explains their mission to their civilization, and that's like what I think is like the best description of aliens if they exist, and how to get around the Fermi paradox, because like these things should be everywhere. Why aren't we seeing them? And it's like, well, duh, they have warp drive and cloaking technology.
And
But
David Fravor, Commander David Fravor says that they were actively blocking his radar. So, I don't think like if he's telling the truth, and if they are,
there's also we have technologies that do all that stuff, and that's what's interesting is those technologies were developed at Site 4 at Tonopah Test Range, not Bob Lazar's mythical S4 at Papoose Lake, which doesn't exist. These technologies were developed real. They're called ECCM, electronic countermeasures, and they were developed at Site 4 at Tonopah Test Range, which is interesting. But they have technologies that do this as well, which you never see talked about. Any of that stuff talked about, because that's capabilities, and they're not going to talk about that stuff in the public. And I talk about it on my channel because I can, and I do, and no one stopped me, except that I feel like I'm shadow banned and like blocked. And anytime I mention any kind of other conspiracy, it's like immediately flagged and gets my whole channel like flagged. So I've been trying to relieve those shadow bans by, making a lot of my more risque, controversial videos unlisted, just to try to get rid of that shadow ban now that I've hit 100,000 subs. And I'm trying to move away from actually, just temporarily, because the world's a scary place right now. And I'm just trying to move away from things that threaten individuals, because you do journalism like I do. It's deep research. And you get it on stuff which, I don't want to hurt anyone's career or anyone's, I've tried to like take that kind of, that's important information to get out there. Sometimes it's like, I don't know. I try to focus on now like the science more, and just getting this team together to push the science forward. And maybe I want to turn my YouTube channel into a lab where you just build stuff and test anti-gravity claims and anti-gravity experiments, because that's kind of what we've been doing for the past 2 years with this group that we've set up. And I think it's a good direction to go in, and it's a safe direction to go in, at least temporarily, until my channel can get a little bit bigger and get rid of the shadow bans, and then I can maybe have some attention, because right now I'm not getting on Joe Rogan. I got on Tim Pool and got like 9,000. I got like almost 10,000 more subs, which set me over the top. It was definitely a good boost. But it's nothing like what would happen if I got on Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? It would just, oh my God. And I just think of the insane audiences that people are reaching on his podcast.
The other one would be Lex Friedman. He has some, because he genuinely gets people to talk about the science behind a lot of stuff. So it's always he's also maybe someone you could target. But like, right, you say you want to talk about the science more on your YouTube. So I want to ask you, like, you mentioned that you think that there's like technology that you're working on that could save the world. Like, what specifically do you mean?
Well, it's low power technology, so it's reducing our carbon footprint by significant amounts. People are out there complaining about Bitcoin's carbon footprint, but like don't talk about cell phone usage, or don't talk about our just regular electronics devices, which are way more. We have way more of those. Way more tablets, way more phones, and way more of these other devices. If we can develop optical photonic technologies with these metallic glasses, like there's a video out by Corning. I really want to talk to those guys at Corning, who are the Mythbusters have teamed up with these guys now. And they made a bunch of these videos called The Glass Age. And they talk about the Glass Age. And I showed those videos to, I showed them to my dad, actually, and he's a pretty good judge of engineering and science. And he couldn't quite understand it the way that he couldn't quite see it the way that I see it and understand it. And the way I understand it is these types of materials that we're going to be able to develop, these types of layered glasses, which will work as circuit boards. They will work as low-level circuit boards that work on photons and just light energy instead of electrons in the phone. And you can pack way more memory, you can pack way more information with storage. You can and they're also nearly indestructible. They're flexible crystals that like store information, and they're stable. Like it's like basically a rock. Like we have rocks, we can go in the ground and dig up quartz crystals that are billions of years old, and they're completely stable, and they have all the information that they started with in them. And there's all kinds of papers you can read on data storage and quartz and data storage and crystals. And this is where things are need to move towards. I believe that, you know, this is if this was what we were, if we recovered something at Roswell, it would be something like this, you know. So I keep telling people that who think we're hundreds of years off or thousands of years off from alien technology and being able to reach that level. We're not. Technology is exponential. It's an exponential curve, and we've already hit that point somewhere. I don't know what exactly you call the singularity, if it's like a limit where the height reaches that's a certain technology, or if it's the slope of that curve. But we're pretty much in it right now. It's way more advanced than many people realize, and we're not far off. It's just that industry and manufacturing and economics and the markets have to catch up, because the markets aren't there yet. We're still, Apple hasn't, quite caught up yet to this. They're getting there, but they're not quite there yet. And I think that some of this technology has almost been suppressed on purpose because they're scared of it. They don't want it to develop too quickly and too fast before they can understand it and really get a good grasp of how to control it and get control over it. And
well, I mean, if it's practically indestructible, that's going to kind of throw a spanner in the works of any of the sort of need to replace things every 2 years.
And the battery technologies too. If you can run them on low power, they can be run on just ambient sunlight. You just leave your phone out in the sun to charge it. These things are going to happen. The technologies exist. They're just not developed yet. We don't have the vision and the foresight in the next generation of scientists. And I'm hoping that the young people who are watching my videos, or I'm in some way training the next generation of scientists. And I think I've already have, because I have emails of people that were graduating 10 years ago, and I get emails all the time. People say, I get just random email. This guy sends me a picture of his degree, and he says, thank you for telling me and convincing me I could do it and making me believe. And that's awesome. That's great, because it's already happening. People have already taken my advice and gone to school for these things and chosen their careers based upon the advice I've given them, and then later come back and said this was sound advice. I wanted to work in classified programs. This has been a dream of mine since I was a kid, and you've basically given me everything that I needed to study to have on my resume to get that job. And that's awesome. Good for you. And I feel like that's another reason that they haven't gotten rid of me yet. It's because I am kind of doing them a favor in some ways. I'm taking a lot of weight off these old timers' shoulders by getting these things out in ways that I don't know. But also it does threaten them to a certain extent, because why would they send these people into my group to disrupt and take us off track in such wild directions, and just be like, oh, this is what you want to spend your time on. No, you just told me everything I want to stay away from, and thank you very much for that.
What makes you think that that they're sending people with deliberate misinformation? What have you got? Has something specific happened, or is this a hunch, or what makes you think that?
There's a lot of different things, and you never know, because some people are just they're misinformed and misled themselves. So it's hard to say. And then there's some people I think that are, because right, I was digging into some of these technologies, and I made a video on that Mercury superfluid torus thing. I was talking about superfluids, and I was talking about Mercury plasmas, and all these ideas that I had about this Nazi Bell stuff that related to it kind of looked like similar to the Podkletnov's experiment with rotating superconductors, and there was a lot of research that was similar to this kind of rotating effect and this rotating Mercury thing. So I made a video on that because and I mentioned the TR3B in there and Edgar Fouché. And Edgar Fouché is like still an anomaly, and we're still digging through everything because he did know certain stuff. He did have the credentials. He was stationed at Area 51, worked on F-15, flight test things and other equipment he was just an equipment technician and stuff, but not like a physicist, but he was a low-level guy, and he definitely worked out there and definitely had some of these credentials and definitely knew some certain things like that checked out over the years. But at the same time, I don't know, he spread a lot of disinformation, he had joined up with me. Like, I got introduced to this guy because after making that video, someone contacted me and said, I can put you in touch with him. They put me in touch with him. And then this guy comes into my group, and I created a forum. He's like, you got to make a forum and talk and put all your stuff on a forum to get it on your website and do a forum with all this stuff. And that way we can get people discussing on there and get a bunch of members, and it will get you tons of, and it was great because I got tons of clicks. But he literally, after I created the forum, he went and filled it up with just every piece of disinformation that is in existence on the internet. I swear, it was just like, I don't know how he had the time or resources to get all that stuff and put it on the website, but I hated it at first, but then it brought me a lot of traffic, and then I was getting tons of clicks, and then I started making I was making $4,000 a month. That was at the height of anything I've ever made. I made it for 2 months. I made like $4,000, and I think like it was like $7,000 total that I made in those 2 months. And then the forum got hacked and shut down, and everything got taken down because as it was starting to grow, and then I was posting all this stuff about other conspiracies and other information that I'd come across all on the forum, just to try to overcome the disinformation stuff. Like, we had a JFK assassination page that literally had a 163-page thread on the limo driver shooting Kennedy, and all the other threads that I had set up about all these other leads and all these other CIA people and the different things. They were all empty. No one would comment, or no one would pay attention to those threads. It was all limo driver shot, it was the limo driver, and I was just like, this is I don't know. It's I don't know. Is that easy to do disinformation? Are they all bots? Are they all, it's no, they can't all be bots and agents, right? I know there's real people on there, and I don't know. They just know the human psychology to know how to get people distracted and get people in chasing the wrong, rabbit holes over and over and over and over and over and over. It was like clockwork. It was amazing to watch it. And but then it got all hacked and shut down. We don't know who hacked the forum, and we still think the other guys blame Ed, and Ed blames the other guys on the forum. And I was gonna have them together for a meeting, and we just not sure if we even want to bring up the whole issue, because one of the admins said he was getting followed by black SUVs, and I was like, why you didn't have the forum? I had the forum. Why aren't they following me? Why didn't I get followed into the grocery store like you claim happened and stuff? I don't know.
Were you jealous? Why are they not coming after me? Am I not a big enough deal?
What, dude? How? Nah. So yeah, it's it was pretty funny, but I wasn't jealous, but I just thought it was funny. I just thought I don't know, because I'm always just, my first instinct is to be skeptical and just say, no, this didn't happen, or it was just some black SUV that maybe they weren't even there for you.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they were following some other whistleblower in the same supermarket.
No, but they could be. Sometimes the Secret Service will go to a city and do surveillance on certain things, like before the president arrives. You know, like when the president's going to go somewhere, like if the president's going to come to Providence tomorrow, next week, right? They're going to send Secret Service here this week to get everything set up. You know what I mean? They're going to basically get everyone plan for it. They're going to sit there, collect with local fusion intelligence on anyone who said anything negative about the president, and then they have a whole FBI profile list of anyone that might be a danger to the president, and so then they debrief all their officers, to like who these guys are, and so that they know them, so that if they see them around, or like walking up to the president, that they'll be able to recognize these guys. And there's all this stuff that happens that like, but so I don't know, it's not on. I don't know that those guys were there for him. They might have been, maybe, who knows? I don't know, but I've never seen anything weird like that happen to me. And believe me, I've been looking, and I just, I don't see anything like that ever happen. It's kind of weird. But I have gotten people that approach me, like this Ed Fouché guy, and got in my group, and I don't know, because there was a lot of things that checked out about him. But then I'm like, as we're going over the case, and I'm like, doing everything. I mean, this guy doxed me. I was alien scientist. I never had my real name out there before Ed Fouché doxed me, and put my whole name and everything out there to like, and so this guy, like, I don't know. I wonder, like, was he hired sometimes? Like, sometimes I question that. Like, was this guy like hired to like infiltrate me and discredit me, and send me on a wild goose chase, like building things with dangerous toxic mercury that creates mercury vapor, and is a neurotoxin, and causes like brain plasticity. So,
Yeah.
should I trust this? I don't know. It just seemed like it seemed like everything that he ever pushed me towards was like disinformation, and except to tell me to go back and get my degree. And then he would buy me gifts. He bought me like like an external storage hard drive, and then he would use those gifts like back against me to try to like bribe me later with them.
So you talked a little bit about the metallic glass. Like how far are we away from that being something that could be maybe not mass produced, but like used in some form of technology, or some sort of like device that's used by like a number of people? Like how far are we from that being like producible?
You know what? I would have to do a little bit more research to have a definite answer for that, because, there's industries that like do research for a whole year, and then will write a report on like the future of, these things, so it would be interesting to, I know a couple organizations like that. Maybe I should reach out to them and see if they could put together a sort of projection report on what the future is for these materials now that they're like public. This was done on drones and several other technologies like that years ago, and some of those projections have been pretty accurate. So they'd probably do a lot better job of that than I would.
So then warp drives. That's the one thing I really wanted to ask you about. Was it just sounds so like sci-fi, like Star Trek, Star Wars, hyperdrive kind of stuff. Like, when did you first come across the idea, and like how close would we be to attempting to test some of the theories?
Say I first heard about it maybe like 2015, 2016. And my immediate reaction was, oh, this is baloney, like warp drive. This sounds like Star Trek. Like, this is so sci-fi and stupid. It's like, oh, this is laughable. Let me go and debunk this real quick and dive in. Because like I had done all this other research on anti-gravity and stuff. Well, I wouldn't really call it research, because I haven't actually built a lot of the stuff yet and tested it, which we're getting around to doing that now, and really vetting some of this stuff fully, one way or the other. But again, I was like, why is no one paying attention to this research? And some of that research is junk, and it's like didn't deserve to be really paid attention to, and I didn't really understand that at the time. And so when I seen warp drive come along, it was almost like, oh, this is like a threat to the research that I've been doing, so like let me dive in and try to debunk this. And yeah, that was kind of how I saw it. And when I started digging into just what they meant by it and what the research, behind it was, and the papers and the theoretical physics going to Bernard Hayes, and how Put Off, who I had discredited Put Off because of, he's Scientologist and pushed remote viewing and a lot of these other crazier ideas in the past and stuff. So I had thought of him as like a pseudoscientist, and also a guy that I had remembered from Sci-Spies as being, someone involved in the, government's psychological warfare programs and stuff. So like I immediately like, this guy's, doing some kind of psychological warfare, and this has got to be like disinformation or something, right? And some of the physics is there, it's sound, and it's backed up by numerous other physicists who've worked on this, and it was fringe and outside the box for a number of years, but now it's coming into greater acceptance. And there's even, mainstream quantum gravity physicists, YouTube people like Sabina Holsenfeld doing videos on warp drive and talking and taking it seriously now, because papers are coming out with new solutions, which use GR and methods of, to create these warp drive equations and solutions to GR, which don't require, the high, infinite or negative energies, which are impossible for the like earlier warp drive theory. The first one being Alcubierre's in 1994, which kind of started this whole thing. Um, you know, it started a massive wave of papers on warp drive, and after Alcubierre wrote that first paper, but his warp drive is unrealistic. So there's been many modifications and new designs to that. NASA's working on one with Sonny White and a number of other people in groups, Tachyon Aerospace, and now most recently, I believe, Virgin Galactic, with now that they've got Steve Justice on board there. So there are these people working on it. And then Battelle announced that they got that contract from the Defense Department for the smart skin technologies for those Mach 6 Plus craft and stuff. And this is all, I believe, somewhat related. And I think that this is where the technology is heading, and it might not be as far away as we think. Like my estimates on the metallic glass thing is, if the right resources and the right researchers and the right people put this together, we could completely change the cell phone. Think about how much cell phones have changed in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And then 20 years going back, because I remember my cell phone from like 2004, 2005, the old Nokia flip phone, like
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
just
even know if it
imagine
was
what you're
that
going to be
early.
holding.
How long ago was that? I got my first phone at like 10, 11, and it was like just like a little Nokia brick thing. And I
Yeah.
thought it was amazing. And like,
Well,
yeah,
these are billion-dollar markets, man. Everyone needs a cell phone in this day and age, and everyone needs a smartphone, and the smartphone market is definitely expanding. And then they're, I believe, going to be the driving force to push this forward if they can understand and catch up. If not, then it's going to be some other company that comes along, and maybe Corning or one of these other metallic glass people that figures out how to do it all, and builds these things and starts building them. It's going, think about how much cell phones technology's changed in 15 years, and then imagine another 15 years. And this is where it's going. So, you have to, it might not be quite there. Maybe it might take 30 years, but it's going in that direction. And we need to be the ones to push it, so.
So, how fast do you think we could realistically go with the warp drives? Like, what
You
sort of
wouldn't be able to
speeds are
go
you
the speed of
talking?
light. You can't go faster than the speed of light, so no time travel.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a couple things. It would be, you could go virtually, almost. I mean, I don't know the limits of it, because you have to have some sort of projection and then shielding technique, and like they have to plot, like the idea from Star Wars where they had to plot the course first and calculate it before they took the warp drive so they don't crash into something or go through a piece of dust or an asteroid or anything. So there's got to be that, and there might have to be shielding in front of the craft to kind of push stuff out of the way, or steer the craft when you're going those super high speeds. So those are all engineering things that will have to be worked out when we get there. But we're still at very, very basic levels right now with the research. We're still experimenting with a lot of these 2D and topological materials, and these new age space materials like the metallic glass and stuff, and spin metals and fermionic spin metals and stuff like that. So I think that in another maybe 10 years, I'm hoping that a lot of the disclosure of this has already been, I believe maybe this stuff has already been developed. That I have that theory too, that a lot of the stuff has probably already been developed and it exists in these black programs. And now it will work its way out in the next 10, 15 years. So there's that theory as well,
So do you think we're like actually like sitting at the start of like what could be the next sort of like big scientific leap forward? Because I mean, Eric Weinstein, I don't know if you're familiar with some of his work, has talked endlessly.
I love Eric.
He's great. He talks endlessly about the sort of lack of progress and imagination in the scientific community at the minute, and what
I'm telling you, he needs me, man. I need to get on these podcasts. I've already reached out to some of these people in their network, and I'm hoping I will be getting on those podcasts within the next 6 months to a year. So I'm hoping for Eric Weinstein and Lex. I'd rather talk to those guys than Rogan, honestly. Rogan doesn't do much for me.
Yeah, I mean, they're more of a scientific mind, but yes. Like, yeah, talking to you gives me like hope that there are people hoping to like kickstart some sort of scientific revolution. Yeah. So final question for you before you go back to sorting out your kids. What do you see in your opinion as like, if you had to say to someone, there's one piece of technology that I'm looking at the minute, or you've looked at or researched or come across in your time looking into these sorts of things that like that really would blow someone's mind or like open someone's eyes to the fact that there is a lot of like really advanced technology being worked on and sort of developed. Like, where would you suggest someone starts?
I would look into slow light, trapped light, and squeezed light, because a lot of it deals with laser optics and stuff. So those three things, if you start there with slow light and squeezed light, you'll find a lot of really interesting stuff. And
could you give us like a 90-second explanation of what slow light is?
So slow light is a way to trap or slow down light inside materials, and there's different schemes for how to do that. And some of those schemes are super interesting and easier to do than others. And there's also time crystals, which I think are related to this as well. So slow light and time crystals and this sort of processes that occur inside of materials with light that's trapped and can be and can also you can vary the speed of light in these materials through these techniques. And these techniques are super interesting because if you can vary the refractive index to change the speed of light, you can also change the speed of gravitons or gravity. So you could effectively find a way to warp gravity. If you knew how gravity communicated, you could find a way to use these same techniques, that slow light and warp light and squeeze light, to do the same thing with gravity waves and with gravity, which would be super amazing. And I think that is the birth of warp drive physics, and we're seeing it right now.
Wow, that's pretty inspiring. But yeah, Jeremy, thanks. It has been fascinating and an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for taking the time, man.
Hey, man. Josh, thank you so much, and take care.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.